Point of order, Murdo Fraser.
I'm grateful, Presiding Officer. I want to raise a point of order in relation to the programming of business for the remainder of this afternoon. We're about to hear a statement from the Cabinet Secretary, a statement scheduled to last 20 minutes. Having seen the content of that statement, it amounts to little more than a party political broadcast for the Scottish National Party. That statement requires to be heard, as are all statements in this chamber, without any interruptions, without any interventions, and in this case no capacity for questions to be put to the Cabinet Secretary on the content of her statement. Now, the statement is followed by a debate when opposition members will be able to speak, but not given the proportion of time that would be available otherwise. And of course, opposition speakers can be intervened on in a fashion that the Cabinet Secretary will not herself face while giving her statement. This is clearly a departure from normal practice, Presiding Officer, and puts the opposition in this Parliament at an unfair disadvantage. And I know this has been agreed by the Bureau, Presiding Officer, in this particular case, but I welcome an assurance from you, or in due course an assurance from Bureau members, this will not set a precedent for future business, given it unfairly advantages members of the government.
I thank Mr Fraser for his point of order. Of course, the matter indeed has been agreed by the Bureau and has also been approved by the Parliament. And I think the other point worth making is that as there will be no opening speaker. Excuse me, Cabinet Secretary, I'm actually answering a point of order. Thank you for respecting the Chair for doing that. So, as I was saying, there is no opening speaker from the Scottish Government in the debate, which I'm sure the member has also noted. So hopefully that addresses the issue that has been raised, and we can now move on. Point of order, Stephen Kerr.
Just for clarity, Presiding Officer, can you confirm that this is actually a fairly rare, if not unprecedented, situation where we have a lengthy 20-minute statement and no ability for any member of this Parliament to question the Minister, in this case the Cabinet Secretary, and in fact even at the budget statement and the programme for government there is opportunity for members to question the person delivering the statement. So can you just confirm that this is actually without precedent?
Thank Mr Kerr for his point of order. I am aware that, in fact, in relation to other matters, this approach has been followed, but I would reiterate the point that this matter has been approved by the Bureau and subsequently ratified, if you like, by the Parliament itself. And on that basis, I am required, obviously, to follow what the Parliament has agreed it wishes to see happen. Thank you. So I think now we can hopefully move on to the next item of business, which is a statement by Shona Robinson on the impact of the UK Government Spring Statement on Scotland. This statement will then be debated, so indeed there should be no interventions or interruptions, and I call on Cabinet Secretary Shona Robinson to make her statement up to 20 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Chancellor's Spring Statement last week seeks to balance the nation's books on the backs of disabled people. Across the UK, over 3 million families will be left worse off from changes to the main health element of the universal credit. That's a Labour UK government seeing existing claimants £500 worse off and new claimants £3,000 worse off. 150,000 carers will lose carers' allowance or the universal credit care element. And, by their own assessment, these Labour welfare cuts will push 250,000 more people into relative poverty, 50,000 of whom are children. Presiding Officer, this is nothing short of shameful. And of course, it was Anas Sarwar who took to the TV studios during the UK general election to promise that there would be no austerity under Labour and that we were to read his lips. The people of Scotland will not quickly forget that this promise has been shattered, just like Labour's promises to Grangemouth, to Waspie Women and to pensioners. The cuts set out in the Spring Statement will also have a direct impact on Scotland's planned budget in the coming years. Initial indications are that the block grant adjustment funding we can expect to receive for social security benefits in 2029-30 will fall by £408 million as a result of the UK Government's changes. the Fraser-Valander Institute has estimated further cuts in planned funding for the Scottish Budget of £200 million in 28-29 and £435 million in 29-30, money that will now not be available to spend on public services. And this comes on top of the shortfall of over £400 million in the public services cost of increased employers' national insurance. So let me be clear. The Scottish Government, we will absolutely strain every sinew to protect disabled people from this deplorable action from the Labour UK Government. But let me also be clear how difficult that will be given the scale of this. Equally, we will continue to tackle child poverty, a job made even harder by UK Government decisions, and we will do this in the face of Labour's austerity on welfare. As a Parliament, we need to start to plan and reckon with the impact that these cuts from Labour will have on the sustainability of public finances. And as such, I will update Parliament on how we are engaging with the UK Government on its spending review, which will report on the 11th of June. In her statement last week, the Chancellor confirmed that £4.8 billion would be cut from welfare benefits by 2029-30. These cuts have been roundly condemned, and the UK Government's own impact assessments show that they could push 250,000 people into relative poverty, including 50,000 children. Now, the line being pushed by Labour following the publication of the UK Government's own assessment was that it did not account for other actions that they were taking, including on free school meals. Now, I'm going to be generous of spirit and take Labour at their word, so perhaps Labour contributors in today's debate can outline when the Labour Government will publish a full impact assessment that does account for the actions that they say are not currently factored in. As given this is their main excuse, I'm sure they'll be keen to publish that evidence as soon as possible. In her statement, the Chancellor further announced that the rate of day-to-day public spending growth would reduce from 2026-27. Economic growth projections have been downgraded from 2% to 1% this year by the OBR and have further sounded warnings about the high levels of uncertainty still facing the domestic and global economy. The full details of the Chancellor's spending plans will be revealed in the UK Spending Review, which will report in June. We know that UK departments have been asked to plan for either a flat cash or a 2% reduction in budget. Either way, this would be a real terms cut. Presiding Officer, one area of the Chancellor's statement that I do welcome are plans to increase defence spending. Now, since the fall of the Berlin Wall over 30 years ago, we've seen what can perhaps be described as a peace dividend. Following Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the shift from the United States, it's clear that this period is over. And this will necessitate, as it will across Europe, sustained investment in building defence infrastructure and in supporting defence personnel. And I believe that to sustain this and other vital public investment, that the UK Government should seriously examine the role of wealth taxation to support these endeavours. Without exploring wealth taxation, there remains a danger that funding for necessary defence capabilities would come from yet further cuts to social security or public services or investment in other vital infrastructure. And of course, it could not be clearer that the UK Government should ditch Trident and should instead invest in deepening conventional defence capabilities. Presiding Officer, the Chancellor's decisions in the spring statement will impact on the Scottish economy. Current Scottish indicators are positive. Our economy grew 0.5% in the 3 months to January, and since 2007, GDP per person in Scotland has grown by 10.3% compared to 6% in the UK. Productivity has also grown at an average rate of 1.1% per year in Scotland compared to the UK average of 0.4%. We also have lower unemployment than in the UK, with a rate of 3.8% in February compared to 4.7% for the UK. We are using the Scottish budget for this year to invest in the foundations of our economy, such as housing, transport, digital connectivity and delivering critical infrastructure for a fair, green and growing economy. We are already ahead of England and Wales in building affordable housing, On average, between 2007-08 and 2023-24, affordable housing supply in Scotland has been 73% higher per 10,000 population than in Wales and 47% higher per 10,000 population than in England. However, our economy will be affected by the decisions of the UK Government, including the rise in employer national insurance contributions, which is already affecting business confidence and jobs. We also recognise the global pressures that the Chancellor has spoken about. With President Trump further increasing tariffs today and the risk to our world-class exports from further trade barriers. The US is Scotland's second largest export market for goods and services after the EU. The US is a key market for important sectors such as food and drink, engineering and advanced manufacturing. All are potentially at risk from an increase in tariffs on the UK. The Scottish Government will, of course, analyse the potential impacts on the Scottish economy from any tariff measures that are imposed. But what the Chancellor does not address is the damage caused by Brexit, which has reduced the UK's GDP by 2.5%. In Scotland, this equates to a cut in public revenues of about £2.3 billion in 2023. That's over £2 billion in annual public revenues due to a Brexit that people of Scotland didn't vote for. That's funding that could be making our NHS stronger, could be enhancing our schools and could be supporting Scottish businesses to find the next markets and secure high-quality jobs. Brexit red tape has hit Scotland's trade with our largest international export market, the EU. It's estimated that in 2023, UK goods exports to the EU were 17% lower and goods imports from the EU were 23% lower due to Brexit. And with a period of uncertainty expected on trade as a result of President Trump's tariff regime, it could not be clearer that for the sake of public finances, if nothing else, that we should rejoin the EU. Being a member of the European single market would boost trade, give young people more opportunities and would dramatically improve the public finances. The Chancellor staked her plans for investment on boosting growth. But if she fails to deliver, then we will inevitably see less money for investment in public services and infrastructure. And I'm particularly concerned about the impacts on rural communities and businesses. I called on the Chancellor to pause her widely criticised changes to inheritance tax for farmers, including tenant farmers, and undertake full impact assessments to understand what they will mean for family farming businesses and the communities they serve. But she has failed to do that. Presiding Officer, we called on the Chancellor to use the Spring Statement to prioritise investment in public services and infrastructure. I wrote to her making clear that the additional funding in last year's budget, welcome as it was, did not make up for 14 years of underinvestment. This investment needed to be sustained. Unlike the UK Government, we must balance our budget every year. That is what we will do, as we have for every one of the past 17 years. But it will be tough. Members are well aware of the impacts of the UK Government's increase in employer national insurance contributions. We have estimated that this will add over £700 million to the cost of delivering public services for the NHS, schools, local government, universities, social care providers and a wide range of third sector organisations. I called on the Chancellor to use this statement to announce that she will fully fund additional costs of the change to national insurance contributions. The Chancellor has failed to do this and, incredibly, has still not confirmed the funding that we can expect. As members will recall, the current indications is that we will have over £400 million short of what is needed, and it will need to wait until May to see the final numbers, when we are already 2 months into the financial year. Frankly, this is not good enough and puts devolved governments at the back of the queue. I stand by the commitment that I made earlier this year to funding 60% of the direct employer costs for portfolios and an additional £144 million for local government. but I cannot go any further than this without additional funding from the Treasury. I'm also very concerned about the impact on commissioned services, third sector organisations and charities. We consistently called on the UK Government to protect them from the impact of this increase, but they have completely ignored the needs of social care providers, GPs, dentists, childcare providers and universities, to name but a few, who will bear the full brunt of this UK tax increase. Presiding Officer, the constraints that our budget will face in future years means that it is essential we continue our work to reform public services, improve productivity and ensure every pound is spent in line with our priorities. The work that the Minister for Public Finance is taking forward will reduce the costs of service delivery and reduce long-term demand through investment in prevention. Through programmes on the public sector estate, collaborative procurement and the use of digital, we are making significant savings for the public purse. We've secured cost-avoiding and cash-releasing savings expected to reach up to £280 million over the past 2 years. To accelerate reform, we have up to £30 million for Invest to Save measures in this year's budget. The savings we make from these programmes will help us to have choices in future years to deal with the cuts to our funding that we know are coming down the track. And I'm committed to ensuring that our public finances are on a sustainable footing, and I'll be setting out our medium-term financial strategy and the fiscal sustainability delivery plan before the summer recess, which will set out the measures we are taking to secure fiscal sustainability. These will be accompanied by updated economic and fiscal forecasts from the Scottish Fiscal Commission, which will take into account the latest economic and fiscal outlook from the OBR. Presiding Officer, the Labour UK Government's planned welfare reforms have caused a great deal of alarm, particularly as sick and disabled people will bear the brunt of the cost savings. For this Government, with its driving ambition to eradicate child poverty, this is absolutely unacceptable. The cuts announced this week appear to be driven by a desire to save money and seek to balance the books on the backs of disabled people. It is of increasing concern that the Resolution Foundation warn that the full scale of welfare cuts is far greater than the net £4.8 billion savings, stating that cuts to ill health, disability and carers benefits rise to £8.1 billion in 2029-30 and will continue to grow over time. And these changes, of course, were announced without any consultation with this Government or the public at the general election, for that matter, despite the fact that they will impact on our devolved benefits and on our budget. The planned changes to eligibility for personal independence payments in England and Wales will impact on the funding that we receive from the Treasury for adult disability payments in Scotland. And of course, we are already spending £1.3 billion more this year on social security benefits and payments than the funding we receive from the UK Treasury, and we're already spending £210 million on measures to mitigate UK Government welfare policies, now including, of course, the cut to the winter fuel payment. So I again called on the Chancellor to abolish the two-child limit in universal credit, but she again failed to do so. Instead, she has taken action that will put more children into poverty, not lift them out of it. So let me be clear. This Scottish Government will be effectively scrapping the two-child cap in 2026. That work is underway. The priority we have given to social security in Scotland reflects the priority we have placed on ending child poverty. And figures published last week showed that the proportion of children living in relative poverty has reduced in Scotland, and the 2023-24 rate is now the lowest it has been since 2014-15. The proportion in absolute poverty has also fallen, with the annual figure the lowest in 30 years. It's a shame that the Labour UK Government does not share this priority. I'm proud of the social security system that we've created and the difference it has made through providing money directly to people who need it most. However, I am aware that we face an increasingly challenging situation as we take stock of the impact of the UK Government's benefit cuts. It is important that we work together as a Parliament to eliminate the scourge of child poverty, but ensure that our social security system is sustainable into the future. Presiding Officer, on Friday, Professor Ruth Patrick of York University and the LSE published a report called Cuts Can't Fix Child Poverty. That report recognises the key factor in the reduction of child poverty in Scotland was the Scottish Child Payment. The report highlights feedback from families in receipt of the payment. One person, Lisa, said in the report, "The Scottish Child Payment alleviates some of the financial pressure and gives me and my son more breathing space to enjoy life. The Scottish Child Payment has been a game changer for me." The expert report concludes, "Our new analysis shows that were the UK Government to follow the Scottish Government's example and make an equivalent per-child investment in social security, the rate of child poverty could drop by 700,000 overnight. Talk of tough choices and fiscal responsibility puts balancing the books ahead of supporting children who are this nature's future." And I agree. Presiding Officer, the funding we have to take forward our work on child poverty, as well as our other priorities, will be determined by the UK Spending Review, which reports in June and will set out funding from 2026 onwards. We know from last week's spring statement that the public spending outlook for the period of that spending review, for which resource funding will be up to 28-29, has been cut from what was previously planned. For capital spending, it will set out budgets to 2029-30, and while the Chancellor said last week she intends to protect capital investment, we still need to see what this will mean for the funding that we have for our infrastructure priorities. The Government has been clear that to support our efforts to deliver economic growth, we need the UK Government to recognise and respect devolved competences. After all, where we can support growth here in Scotland, this would contribute to the Chancellor's growth ambitions. Frankly, we need the investment from the UK Government to match the rhetoric. For example, the UK Government must make a positive decision on awarding the Acorn project and the Scottish cluster as a priority, and it's estimated that the Scottish cluster will contribute £17 billion to UK GVA out to 2050, and it's a clear opportunity for the UK Government to work with us to stimulate this investment. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, I've been frank with Parliament about the impacts of the Chancellor's spring statement on our economy and on public finances. And I'll be meeting the Chief Secretary of the Treasury and the Scottish Secretary later this month to set out this Government's position and the importance of ensuring that the UK Spending Review delivers for the priorities and the needs of Scotland. We don't yet have full clarity ourselves on all of the detail, and much of that detail for future planning will be contingent on the UK Government's Spending Review in June. It's vital now that the UK Government engages with us fully as it looks to conclude the spending review. We want to seize the opportunities it presents for Scotland and support the delivery of economic growth, which is crucial to the Chancellor's own plans. However, it's clear from the spring statement that our public services that the outcome will be very, very challenging indeed. Presiding Officer, this Government will always focus on doing what is best for the people of Scotland, and we will set out the detail of that when we get to the end of May with MTFS and the Fiscal Sustainability Delivery Plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary.